Hello, everybody. Welcome to Season 4, Episode 11 of the show I like to call Trey Walking Through the Pacific Northwest with men who have a last name that's related to botany. It's a real niche.
Yes,
but
you found one.
I own the niche. I am with the awesome Kevin Rose. Kevin, where are we today?
We are in Portland, Oregon, just in the woods in Tryon Creek, which is, it's our first time here. My first time here.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to walk through this little forest because I've heard so many great things about all the different trails that are here. And it's an awesome day. Like like fresh rain smell, a little bit of fog, a lot of moss.
It's very romantic, our first walk.
It's my first 3D, 360 degree
video
too, as well. So
that's a format I'm playing with. I just like to walk and talk with clever people and just have a conversation. No doubt we're going to solve all the world's problems in the next hour.
Yeah.
Very little doubt about it. By the way, if it's your first time seeing a 360 video, you can just grab the screen and move it around. You can look at everything we're seeing. You can look up, look down, look at us.
It's so cool. I got to buy one of these cameras.
Yeah.
What do they run? Are they expensive?
Oh, I think it's $400 or less.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. You can do a lot of stuff with it. Okay, so we'll kind of just have a meandering conversation. You know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for all that you've built, and I'll put in the description all the cool stuff you've done. We'll go through the litany of it right now. But not only do I, think you're clever and a real intellectual, we connect on a Zen level, but beyond that, I want to talk to you about vulnerability, because ever since I first discovered you so long ago, I could sense a vulnerability. And I think that people can sense this, and they see like a real authenticity in you because of that.
I appreciate that.
What kind of got you to that point? What's been your path with having an open heart and being vulnerable?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I think that when I take a look at where I grew up, which was Las Vegas of all places, kind of a odd place to be as a child, growing up amongst slot machines inside of grocery stores and all the chaos that comes with Vegas. In that type of culture, it's very much like monster trucks and Red Bull and like a man's a man and you got to go gun shooting and so that was me for much of my life. It was like I had all types of guns and I wanted to get my truck all jacked up, and that was kind of like the person that I identified with.
Right.
But I think later, as I got older, I just discovered that that was it really wasn't leading to any personal growth. I feel like that was very much my father, which was put up all of the walls, don't talk about your feelings, men don't cry, just all these, and I realized that if I was to grow, if I was going to try and, just emotionally become a more open person and avoid some of the pitfalls that my family, ran into with my dad not being able to really work with my mother to try and find solutions to problems, which ended up being fights and arguing and all that.
Right.
I realized I had to take a different path, because I didn't want to become that angry, closed-off person that was my father. My father, I always say this when I talk about my dad, because he had some awesome attributes as well, and I think it would be unfair not to mention that he was an amazing dad as a dad and someone that coached me and helped me get into Boy Scouts and become an Eagle Scout and all the things that we did together in terms of fishing and woodworking, and I mean awesome father, not the best husband. So I realized that what else is there out there, and how can I explore and get in touch with other things that may help me grow? And so I noticed that once I started opening up, and it was initially, honestly, it had a lot to do with my wife, and that, I had a lot of different anxiety and fears around certain things, and as I started to open up, I just realized this weight just drops Just like you just like let this let it go.
Yeah.
And when you can talk about things, like things just get easier.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to keep that snowball going.
Right.
You know, it's like,
Yeah.
wow, like life can feel awesome. Should we go down this path? Try this one?
Yeah. It's true. There's so many counterintuitive truths to life, and one of them is to be stronger, you have to be more vulnerable.
Right.
Which doesn't make logical sense.
Well, it does.
But it makes life sense.
If you think about that, the hardest thing to do is the strongest thing to do, and the hardest thing to do is to be vulnerable.
Right.
Right. So that actually is the strongest thing you can do. So real strength is actually vulnerability.
That's true.
Isn't that crazy?
That's true.
That is totally true.
Right.
And so I realized, once I realized that actually, no, this is strength. This is power. This is like me becoming a stronger human being. Like that switch went off my mind and said, okay, well, I'm going to try this.
Right.
And I started opening up to people, started opening up to friends. And then when I was on podcasts, I'd open up about certain things. And I just felt better and better and better. And the more you can release and realize that I'm flawed, but guess what? So is everybody else.
Right.
You know? So why don't we just be real about it and just talk about it, and we'll all be in a better place, right?
It's true. You know, there's which way now? This is like that Bender Snatch
might
episode. I made every bad decision. Okay. So.
I've never been here before, so we're just randomly taking signs.
This is going to be like that Japanese forest where people go in to commit suicide, and they decide they don't want to, and they can't find their way out,
no
and
way.
they die.
So I almost went to that forest a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was right by Mount Fuji. It's not too far away, apparently, 45 minutes or something.
Yeah, that's the scary thing, is a lot of people go in there, and they face their mortality, and they see bodies hanging around. They're like, oh, man, I have so much to live for. And they try to get out of the forest, but they're lost, and they die anyway.
Are there bodies hanging?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. I didn't know that.
Let's brighten the subject.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about, like, I want to give practical advice to people who are learning to become vulnerable, because I notice now a lot of people online, on social media, they all post, I think there's two ways to be vulnerable online. Okay, one is not so good and one is great. And the one I see that is not so good is people, they get on there and they complain about something that's going wrong in their life. Someone has wronged them. The world is against them. Very victimized. And they just kind of put that out there. And then they get, hundreds of responses. Love and prayers. And they really, it's almost just like they whinge and complain about something that's bad with their life, almost just to maximize comments.
Right.
Have you noticed this as a growing trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're saying just attention grabbing. So
Yeah.
that's the idea of like saying, can I do this to get the most amount of reaction? And that's a form of pain and suffering, right?
It is, yeah.
So I feel like that, I don't know. I don't know that that's it. I don't find necessarily anything wrong with that, in that person, we all go through this, where we have something that's kind of like pretty big going on in our lives, and we want to share it with others. The question is it becoming, are you doing it because of just because you want more likes, you want more recognition? Is it a way to be like, you see what I'm saying?
I think some people see this happening, and they want that kind of attention, and then so they complain. It's almost like a weird meme. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a better way to be vulnerable, not to be judgmental, but this is sort of another way to think about it, is that there's three levels. Level one is saying, like, here's something that's not going right in my world, okay? Level two, like, continue. Don't stop there. You can say, like, here's what I've learned from it. Mm-hmm. Here's what I've taken away from it. And then level three is, like, here's what I'm doing about it now. And in this way, I think you could be more inspirational, and if you frame it in, like, it's about them, it's about helping other people. It's not about whining about me. It's about loving other people and using my lessons as an example. And I think I would like to see more people think through it like that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. For me, I guess where I'm trying to think about, like, publicly where it started, because I think it's on a personal level. I was talking to friends about certain things that I wanted to get out there, especially around some of the stuff with my dad. But actually, it probably started with therapy. Like, therapy is one of those things where so many people are afraid to say that they've ever talked to a therapist.
Right.
Like it's like this like negative thing that people still associate it with, and I don't look at it that way. I look at it as a therapist as just like an amazing coach, like someone that can come in and give you the tools that you need to be able to figure this stuff out. Because people like we just don't have these. We're never taught any of this in school.
Right, they can ask the right questions in sort of this Socratic way, because we do all have the answers inside of us, but we don't know the right questions to ask.
Right.
And they can help see our blind spots and ask those questions.
Yeah, I did that early on with Daria, my wife. We went to therapy and couples therapy, and we were able to work through some issues that we had around our fears around marriage and some of the other things that we were trying to get through. And it was like we just didn't have the tools to realize that we were on the same team, and we were both trying to have the same outcome. And how can we have a conversation that addresses each other's fears without really setting somebody off in a downward spiral? And how can they feel supported? So it was just like, once we learned that, then, you know, I think of like therapy can be this great thing where you check in like every, 2-3 years. Like you don't have to continue every single month.
Yeah.
Like I haven't been with Daria in quite some time, but I can tell you if we ran into something again that was a problem, like that would be my first stop.
I think it's a good idea. I mentioned this to some friends that were about to get married, this thing that you did, which is new, because normally you don't go to marriage therapy until it's way too late.
Right.
But if you kind of make it a regular checkup process, it becomes part of a routine, then things kind of stay on the rails.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, I think it's a smart.
Yeah, and I would say that would probably be my first stop for people, rather than turning to social media and using it as a way to... I mean, you could use close friends, like a closed group inside of like Instagram or something as that, but like rather than using it as like a, oh, woe is me, like let me just get this out there to the masses, it could be start with something smaller and certainly with people that you know can help you versus just people that are going to pile on in a negative way.
Yeah, it's true. I think we're in a weird place with social media. It's a new, to me, sociological phenomenon where you've always been interested in your friends and your family and their feedback, and it's a nice support network. But now, because we're accidentally connected to 90% strangers, you're seeking the support and affection and feedback from total strangers, which has never happened before in human history.
Right.
It's a weird thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weird things about social media. Just like I have kids deleting their posts if they don't get enough likes after a certain amount of time. Like, there's a lot of pressure there. And there's a lot of pressure, too, to be your best self. Like, people always, like, I mean, think about how many times, and I'm guilty of this, too. Like, you retake a photograph because you're like, I just didn't look right there. I have a double chin because I've been having too many beers and, like, like weird stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think it happens to everybody.
I get it. All right, so amongst our...
Here's a mushroom.
Oh. We're going to talk about hallucinogens soon, by the way.
That's not right.
It's got gills on it.
It's got gills on it.
Yeah.
Poisonous.
Let's talk about another common love and interest of Japan.
Yes.
Japanese
Go this
culture.
way?
Yeah. Oh, it has main parking that way, so we can go this way.
Okay, yeah.
How many times have you been to Japan? What made you fall in love with it?
I would say I've been there probably, that's a good question, maybe 7 or 8 times, something like that.
That's about how many I've been.
And I first went out there to do actually my podcast Ignatian way back probably, oh gosh, I don't even know now, maybe 12 years ago or something like that. And I think that when I landed in Tokyo for the first time and just got off the plane, I just realized that I was no longer in Kansas. Like, this was a completely different world and a different environment. Like,
parallel universe.
Yeah, I mean, you go to London, you go to Europe, like, there's so many things that you can associate with and, like, instantly be like, oh, this is just a slightly different language, but this is the same in so many ways. When you go to Japan, it's just like you start to experience what their culture is all about, and their attention to detail and the cleanliness and just all the amazing things that Japan has to offer. I was hooked. I was hooked from day one.
The people and the culture. I've often thought about moving to Japan, but I can't figure out a way to break it to my wife.
Well, you got to get her on board. Daria's on board. My wife is ready to go. She's she'd go spend some months there. I think we're going to try and do 1 month in Tokyo or in the surrounding areas sometime in the next year and a half. That's a good. Why don't you start there? Start with like a month.
That's a good idea.
And just like get her hooked on the culture and the food. And is she a big Japanese foodie or?
Yeah, she likes healthy food, and it's probably one of the healthiest food places in the world.
For sure.
In fact, I've heard a lot of chefs, like real chefs, Michelin star professional chefs, when the question they always get, like, if you could live in one country the rest of your life, what would it be? They all say Japan.
Yeah. It's because you have so many people that go really deep on one specific thing, and they take that to the absolute extreme. There was last time I was in Japan, or 2 times ago, I saw this gentleman, older gentleman, probably in his, I'd say, I don't know, maybe early 80s, came out of his house, and I'm waiting for an Uber, and I called an Uber, and it was going to be like 15-minute wait because there's not that many Ubers over there. And so just sitting there waiting, and this old man comes out, and he starts polishing his mailbox with like a rag. And I mean, for 15 minutes, he wasn't even a tenth of the way through it. And I was just like, wow, what appreciation for your things.
Yeah.
And for, like, the cleanliness of the streets. Like, you can eat off the streets there. And just, like, the attention and level of detail and thoroughness of, like, going through. And this applies to everything that is done there. So it can be, if you go meet and sit with someone that is a master tempura maker, all they do is tempura. And they do it to at the highest level.
Right.
And that applies to everything, which is fun.
I can watch them do things all day. There's a mindfulness and a presence to everything they do. And I read that in Shintoism, they do have a connection to their things. They feel like their things are part of their soul, part of them. And this is why there's zero theft there. Because it's like stealing part of someone else's stuff. You can just leave your stuff there forever. No one's going to steal it. It's incredibly unique like that.
Yeah.
It makes you feel very safe.
Yeah, it's really cool when you walk down the street and see all these beautiful bikes unlocked, and you feel very safe walking around there.
Have you read this book called Geek in Japan?
No.
This guy named Derek Sivers turned me onto this book, and I think I've been there 6 times. And I'm like you, I'm a people watcher. I'm always watching people, and I've always found them to be quirky and cute and nice and honorable, but I always kind of I never really thought about why, but this book explains like 100 of these tiny little, idiosyncrasies that their culture has. Like, for example, do you know why Japanese girls cover their mouth when they laugh?
No.
Fascinating. Okay, listen to this. During...
Look at this little bent.
Cute.
Little overlook.
Yeah. So, during the Meiji period, which is 150 years into about 1900, whenever women got married, they had to dye their teeth black to indicate that they were married.
Wow.
And they were embarrassed about it.
How does one do that?
They use some kind of a black lacquer. There's a few cultures around the world that do this. And so the women would be embarrassed when they laughed, because they would still laugh. So they would cover their mouth, and then their little girls would watch them laugh, and they would do that.
And it's just carried on to this
And even though it stopped in 1870, everyone still does it because they learned it from their mothers.
Wow, crazy. I had no idea.
So the book is just full of all kinds of stuff like this. They're like, wow. And it kind of, it doesn't make your experience that different. It's kind of, I guess, kind of learning that the earth is not flat, that it's a sphere. It still looks the same, but now you just have a little more understanding of what's going on. Let's go that way.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'll definitely pick that up.
Yeah.
You said Geek in Japan?
Geek in Japan. It's a real easy read. So I was thinking about when you picked up that mushroom and you're talking about your dad. I remember listening to you talk about going through a guided therapy using augmented with hallucinogens.
That's right.
I do a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm very experimental in all these areas. I found that it's opened up my mind in permanent ways. It's opened up rooms in my brain that I can revisit anytime. And it's been a real growing experience for me. And I know you were a little scared to try this stuff.
Oh, for sure.
And you went to a counsel session. What was your experience like? And would you recommend these counseled guided sessions for people?
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see that it's finally starting to catch on, and that there's being clinical studies that are done right now to great success, and then also that we have, even here in Oregon, we have on the next ballot, next election, to legalize the kind of therapeutic use of psilocybin and mushrooms to help people. But Yeah, I mean, I was scared. I was scared as hell. For me, I had done mushrooms a couple other times with friends in a very casual, let's giggle and watch the clouds kind of way.
Yeah.
And I did them one time. Actually, it was the first time I did them, where I took too much, and all of a sudden, this is gonna be a fun puddle to navigate. All of a sudden, I couldn't feel my heartbeat anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Started freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like my body was a shell. I kind of went to a dark place, you know?
Right.
So mushrooms were very scary and something I really didn't want to touch. And when I was doing them, I had only done a couple of times post that, and I did them in a very microdosy kind of way, like I can barely feel it, but I'm still doing it with the crew, you know?
Right.
So anyway, I talked to some friends that like Tim Ferriss and some other folks that have been experimenting and funding some of this research. And, the idea, if you buy into it, which I wasn't sure if I did, was that if you do a high enough dose, you can blast through the anxiety portion and go straight to the portion where you're, in outer space, back in your brain, working through and traversing different things in your brain and working through some of these problems. Mm-hmm. And I had once heard it described to me as like 10 years of therapy in a single day. And I was like, well, that's interesting because like my dad had passed away, and I didn't really have a way to go in and really kind of address and work through some of these things that I wish I had brought up to him, right? And so I found a guy that was out in New York, and I was like, okay, well, this is someone that's trusted. It's like a husband and wife team, and they come highly recommended, and I could just go out there and basically I was like, met with them once. They seemed really cool. They assured me that they'd be there with me through the entire way. You look it up online. No one's ever died from this type of thing. So I'm like, okay, well, shit, let's try it.
Yep.
Talked to my wife about it. She's like, go do it. So went out there, drank it down, about 5 grams of mushrooms. It was in liquid form.
And this is like in a closed room environment.
Yes.
They're going to take care of you the whole time.
That's right.
You set up an intention.
That's right.
So it's not like it's the opposite of like party mode mushrooms.
That's right.
It's a self-healing introspection.
That's right. Yeah. So this is the same, more or less the same protocol they use at Johns Hopkins and all the different places where they're testing out these compounds on actual like cancer patients that are trying to deal with end-of-life scenarios and things like that.
Depression.
Depression, you name it. So I was like, okay, well, we'll list out like you said, the things that I wanted to go into and put the mask on. So you wear like a sleep mask when you're doing it. And yeah, I mean, sure enough, within 20, 30 minutes, I was just blasted. And it is a rocket ship, so you're riding it through the atmosphere, and it gets a little scary. And you're like, oh crap, I'm losing control of my body in terms of like I'm feeling different things, and I'm being kind of like taken to a different realm. And I lost all that dissolved away. I was then able to go in and just really explore some of the feelings that I had from my father. And I realized that, some of the anger that he had was due to anger that his father had towards him, and that it could end, this realization that it could end with me, and I could just release it and let it go. And I could just like let it all go. And that insight, and it's funny, it's like you could say, well, someone could just tell you that, or you could work through that in therapy. But it's a deeper insight than we can explain verbally.
Right.
It's not like you can say, well, yeah, I get that. Yes, I could understand that if someone told that to me, but I couldn't feel it at such an intimate level.
Right.
That
it's not an intellectual level. It's
exactly.
Transcendent spiritual level.
That's right. And so you feel it in this really deep way that is core to you, and then you just start sobbing. You just start sobbing and like releasing all of these years, all of these like layers of the onion that have just been building up over the years of different traumas that you've gone through in life. And those can be like kids making fun of you on the playground to you name it. And you can really kind of take your mind and go anywhere you want and explore. And so I did that for 6 hours, and it was a very therapeutic thing. I came out of it feeling amazing, kind of rebuilt from the ground up. It's like taking apart the engine and just like cleaning away a lot of the garbage and rebuilding it, and you just kind of feel like, wow, okay, I'm back in a more solid state,
Yeah.
And so that was my experience, and I would say that it was, I'm excited for these compounds to be known as not just things that we do as a recreational kind of fun in the park things. Because, like, don't get me wrong, I think there's benefits to having fun with your friends in that way too. But this is different. This is a whole nother level. It's like you can't even kind of compare them, because when you take that high enough of a dose, I wouldn't even tell you it's like the same substance almost. Like it just like takes you to a different realm that is not there at a much lower dose.
It's very hard to talk about because it does have this ineffable quality, and I completely recommend it too. I've had amazing breakthroughs. I haven't done the counseled session, although I'm interested in it. I'll definitely try that. But I've still had breakthroughs even just while on these things in various circumstances. I think you can't help but be introspective sometimes on these things, but a guided way might be even better. I think if people want to know more about it, I think we would both recommend Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind.
100%.
Because he's like a best-selling author, super mainstream. Many years ago, I read The Omnivore's Dilemma. He's a total skeptic. He's 60 years old. He talks about why they went away, all the research that was done beforehand, now how they're coming back. All the research is being done now. They're in phase 3 trials, and it's all real stuff. He also goes through the whole thing himself. He tries all these different things. But again, he's a total skeptic, doesn't believe in it, and he makes a strong case that it's probably the best new tool for treating all kinds of mind problems, much better than Xanax, all these opioids, and clearly that stuff doesn't work. Right?
I mean,
it just numbs you down.
That whole industry is broken.
Right.
And it is so refreshing to me that even when I see these reports of marijuana being legalized and then the opioid rates like decreasing based on the legalization of marijuana, like, yes, we need this. We need this stuff now.
I think, people can just look at it objectively. We all know a lot of numb people in the world, and then we know people like, I'm not saying this in an egotistic way, people like us that are like fully alive and fully engaged because we have opened up these parts of our mind, and we're works in progress, and we don't choose to numb ourselves to the realities of the world, because it's an awesome world.
It's an awesome world.
It takes a while to let go of some things, but hey, not so tough.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of like, if you can get on this path of not thinking that self-improvement is a negative thing. For so long, it's like that aisle of the bookstore was like, you don't want to be caught on that aisle of the bookstore, because like someone might look over and be like, oh, that person screwed up, But there's not a single person in, like, of all, you have to be in the same boat, but of all I've hung out with tons of Fortune 500 CEOs that, you sit down with them and you're like, wow, on paper and in magazines and everything that you do, like, you're on top of the world, and they have really deep personal issues that they're dealing with. And so it's like, just because you see this idea of success in the media, we all have these demons that we have to deal with, and they come in different flavors and forms. And if we can just admit that to ourselves, I think we'll be in a much better place.
Well, we live in, nothing wrong with capitalism and commercialism and all that stuff, but we do live in a world where success is based on these materialistic things rather than spiritual things, as opposed to our ancestors. We've only been removed from these plant teachers, as they called them, for the last 400 or 500 years in serious industrialization. And now that we can reconnect with these things, we can reconnect to that spiritual level. I'm not saying religious, but just like on a personal level, for personal growth and personal stability is more important than all this capitalist scorecard type stuff.
Yeah. 100%. Did you ever hear about, Paul Stamens, the mushroom guy at fungi.com, and he's been a big proponent of medicinal mushrooms in the sense of, like, I'm not talking about psychedelics, just like the idea of having lion's mane for brain health and reishi mushrooms and all these great mushrooms that you can buy at the stores. One of the things that he was talking about that I thought was fascinating is that there's this theory out there that in Africa there are these herds that move and they leave their manure droppings behind, and so as our great ancestors were kind of tracking these herds, one of the things that's known is that these psychedelic mushrooms grow in this like leftover like dung. And so there's this theory out there that our ancestors ate these psychedelic mushrooms as they were tracking the herds. And it's been shown to create neurogenesis in the brain and actually expand the brain and grow the brain. So they're thinking a lot about why we are who we are today came from this idea of brain expansion through psychedelics, which is fascinating.
Let's talk about our kids.
Yes.
And how kids have changed our lives. What's been the last year and a half been like being a new dad? How has it changed you?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty crazy transition because your life changes a lot on a bunch of different fronts. Dari and I were so used to our routine that you get into, that when a baby comes along, it just like throws that all out the window.
Yeah, that's for sure.
The first few months are very much about the mom, as you know. Like I was there to support and kind of hang out and be like, oh, that's a cute baby. I can't believe it's mine. But you don't get a really solid, like, one-on-one dad connection until there's like eye connection, laughing, smiling, like things like that.
Yeah.
So now that she's a year and change, we are like homies. Like,
that's awesome.
She rides up on my hip and like dances to music with me, and like it's amazing. It's it's just like you just love this little thing so much. It's I had so many friends that had kids, and my number one question with them were like, are you just like trying to like trick me into having kids too because you're in hell? Because like from an outsider looking in, when you don't have kids and there's like crying babies and all this other crap, you're just like, oh man, that looks like something I don't want to do. And then you have one and you're like, okay, I get it. They weren't trying to trick me. It's amazing. It's challenging. It's difficult. It's a lot of work, but it's also when they scream your name and smile and laugh, and it's like all that work just fades away, and it's like it's all love. So yeah, it's been awesome.
What has it taught you about like watching the human brain develop as it starts to recognize things around the world and like the nature of consciousness?
Well, it slowed me down a bit, to be honest. Like just like when I watch her pick up like little pebbles and like look at them so deep and like such great detail, I want to do that as well. And so I'm like, I'm just going to mirror everything you're doing.
This way?
I think it's this way, right?
Oh, man.
We'll see if we get lost. This might be a 6-hour podcast. It won't be a podcast. It'll be the camera will die.
Our final podcast.
Yeah, final, exactly. Someone will find this.
It's going to be Blair Witch. We're going to be over there in the dark.
I can always pull out my phone at some point. But yeah, so I think that, there's a couple things. One, I remember things that my mom did with me that I had forgotten. Like just like little things like changing the pajamas and you have to point your toes and like all these little things where it's just like, whoa, it triggers these little memories that come back. That's cool.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is just like it's taught me that I need to focus my attention.
All right, I have to apologize, me being an amateur podcaster. I didn't have enough battery to keep this thing going in the forest, so now it's raining outside. But we'll continue the conversation. Where are we now?
We are at a bar at my house. This is my own little hidden whiskey room.
This is awesome. You have a little, maybe I shouldn't say how you accessed it. I saw it. It was super cool. Mind-blowing.
Well, I think people can just like scroll over the video, right, and see the secret.
Okay, well, I was trying to keep it under wraps, but now
That's funny.
Also, this is beautiful in here. We may never leave, actually.
Yes, we just stay here and have some drinks, even though it's 9 a.m.
So, when we last left our hero, he was talking about kids and how it's kind of changed him and given new insights maybe into his own life. So, continue now that we were full battery.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just for me, it's bringing back those memories of being a child and what it was like to not have all the additional layers and filters of what we have today, all these walls that we put up over time, right? So, when I watch my little one explore a pebble or a piece of lint with such like intensity and interest, it just reminds me that we're still capable of that and can take pleasure in very simple things. And oftentimes, as adults, our minds are going in so many different directions. You just realize how much kind of like general anxiety and all these different like layers of the onion that have added onto you over the years. And it's just nice to be reminded that we can go back to that place, whether it be through meditation or psychedelics or other things, and hopefully make that a little bit more accessible and something that is a default, versus something that's really hard to find. That's been big. Also, just like this idea of something that just can love you so much, and you feel this like little bond to this little thing that you just want to, I don't know, you just care so much for, and it's such a random, weird miracle that they just came out of nowhere. Right. It's still hard to be like, I helped create that. You know, it's such a weird concept to wrap your head around. But it's been fun.
It's kind of proves the overall point that we know that like love is the answer. Like there's not a finite amount of love in the world.
Yeah.
And by creating all these awesome humans and kind of teaching them the right way, you know, it's a good way to move the needle. And when you see Zelda examining little pebbles and stuff, I was thinking about, you know, some of these Buddhist monks will do that. They'll just go out there and like appreciate a flower for hours.
Right.
And what do you like? Because I know you meditate and you're into hallucinogens, same as me. And some of these masters can get there and appreciate a flower without any need for psychedelics. Sometimes I feel like psychedelics are a crutch or a shortcut because I'm lazy. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if that's bad or good. Do you have any? Because sometimes I think like that Buddhist monk, you know, sitting on a mountainside looking at a mountain flower, you know, I feel like that's a more pure way to do it.
Sure, yeah. I think, I had Tim Chang on the podcast, and you're friends with him as well.
Love that dude.
I love that dude. I think he framed it quite well in that he said, it's kind of like taking yourself from the bottom of the mountain, which you know you have to climb, and do the hard work to get there.
Right.
Blasting yourself up to the top of the mountain, and then quickly throwing your ass back down to the bottom of the mountain again. You know the mountain exists.
Right.
You know that the peak is there. Mm-hmm. And if you can go in and dissolve the ego for, a couple hours, and go up there and feel and kind of like get a sense of where you could go, I think it really increases motivation. So for me, when I've had a couple experiences where the ego kind of softens or melts away, it's a beautiful state of mind to be in. And knowing that we can get there without psychedelics is awesome. And so that makes me even more passionate about wanting to commit to a real practice. And I think that, there's a couple... I hope that people get... Well, let me tell you the difference. The difference pre and post psychedelics for me was... Pre was like, I was like a McDonald's meditator. Like I came in for the quick, fast food sandwich, quick little 15 minutes in and out.
Meditation.
I'm going to come in, I'm going to get my anti-anxiety on, and do my meditation, and I'm out, right? And I think that that is not really hitting the gym. That is not doing the heavy work that's required. And if that brings you relief, and that's all you're here for, awesome. Just keep doing that. There's no harm in that. And obviously, it can help people. But I don't want, personally, I'm going for something a little bit deeper, and I want to go all the way. And realizing that has turned it into something that is, and seeing that it's possible has turned it into something that is not a 15 minutes a day thing. It's trying to ramp my way up to an hour a day, and really putting in the hard effort and the time required to actually get that level of outcome, which is very different than someone that's just doing it recreationally for 10 minutes a day.
Right. And you said you are trying to increase your meditation by 5 minutes a month?
That's right.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and also I want to feel, the 5 minutes a month, and also just making sure, I'll give you an example. I've hit 30 minutes, right? And I could have already gone up. But I still felt like my mind was not quite at the place. They're still having quite a bit of monkey mind. Right. I want to have sustained attention and awareness for most of that 30 minutes before I move to the next level. Right. So I've decided to put a little pause on that because I just want to make sure I really hone in this time. Right. And part of this is just not getting discouraged and realizing that meditation should be fun.
Yeah.
You should walk away from it always, whether it was successful or not, and saying, well, I had a good time. I put in some good effort there, and it was a great time. And the second it becomes, oh gosh, like I'm beating myself up over that.
Right.
That's when I think a lot of people bail. And
Right.
I just want to be careful not to increase the time before I increase the skill.
And so, I don't know if you mentioned your meditation app is called Oak.
Yes.
I super recommend it. It's fantastic. And I think, I think meditation is very difficult and scary for people to be like, oh, I can't quiet my mind for 15 or 30 minutes. But that's not even the point. It's okay to have a monkey mind for 30 minutes. You're not going to enter some sort of zen for 30 minutes. And there's techniques for all of us, because all of us have this problem, and some of these meditation apps have these great techniques. What's the gentleman's name that wrote The Search for Yourself at Google?
Oh, yeah, I can't recall off the top of my head.
I got a selfie with him. Anyway, he has a great little concept in that book that, and I think this is the case with most meditations, is that, you'll catch yourself having thoughts like, oh, I need to get the mail, or I need to get my mom a birthday gift, or just the stuff, right? It's okay to notice that, and then just let it go. Let it go. And then every time you let it go, he equates it to like doing a curl.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you get a little stronger at just noticing it and letting it go.
I love that analogy, and I've used it a lot myself as well, because like if you can reframe it from being damn it, I didn't do this right, which is a frustration, which causes more anxiety, and you're not really releasing at that point. If you can reframe it to say, oh great, there was another rep I just did. Right. There was another, I just lifted that weight one more time. And I should be here to lift weights. Yeah. And it's okay to lift weights. Like I'm just getting stronger with every weight that I lift. That's the way to do it. That's the way to frame it.
It's a nice way to think about it. All right, you guys. So be sure to listen to his podcast. He's having great conversations.
I'm having you on soon too.
Yeah, we're gonna have a fun one. Thank you for that. But you can skip mine. You hear all the happy horse shit I say all the time. But I think that he's such a good. I know you're a little bit like me. I'm not saying this in a self-congratulatory way. In that, like, I'm not really an interviewer. I don't really know how to ask questions. I mean, it's more of like it's just a conversation.
Yeah, and a curiosity around stuff,
Yeah. And he's got so many great ones. So go check him out. Just go through the list. It's overwhelming. You don't have to go in order. It's not like watching General Hospital. You can watch stuff out of order.
Yeah, just kevinrose.com is the place to go, and we got all the RSS feeds there and links to the podcast. And yeah, I would say Michael Pollan's a great episode that I really enjoyed. I had one with Tony Robbins where we talked about finance. That was awesome. Arya Stark, who from Game of Thrones, she was on recently, and we went through all her new kind of startup and things like that. It was like really fun to see Maisie Williams is her real name. See her actually start a young entrepreneur just getting off the ground, 21 years old.
Right.
And she was such a sweetheart. That was a fun one too.
I think she's a good example of like anyone can do anything at any age.
Yeah.
Right? And if you find something you're passionate about, there's an infinite amount of resources out there. Nothing's holding you back.
Yeah.
Do things different. Be bold. Don't be afraid. And I think that's kind of a continuing theme among all your podcasts.
Yeah. I mean, I think failure is I love the idea of failure, just admitting that you've learned something. And it's not so many people for so long. I've always looked at failure as being like this, oh, we don't talk about that. And I actually love when people will be like, oh, like, how did the dig turn out, or what happened with that? And you're just like, oh, here's how I really screwed it up.
Right.
And here's what I learned.
Right.
And, like, let's share that. Like, why not? Like, that's just life in general. So the more things we can fill out, the better. We're just learning and learning and learning, which is great.
I dig it. All right. Hey, let's end this by giving a 360 hug.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you could do that.
Well, it's the first time.
Nice.
All right. Stay awesome, man.
Thank you.
Take care of Daria and the two babies.
Two babies.
All right.
Chaos.
Bye, everybody.